Tamsin Vale kept her compost in sandbags stitched like patchwork quilts, not just for convenience, but because sandbags made excellent ballast once she lashed them to the ribs of her balloon. From the roof of the 22-story Citrio Tower, her small orchard of persimmon trees rustled in the thermal updrafts, and their leaves flashed like green coins against the afternoon glare. Beyond the rim of her roof garden stretched the impossible geography of Aralis, gleaming bridges that arced over nothing, vertical boulevards pinned to air by the hidden pressure of gravity wells, and, far on the hazy horizon, the pale silhouettes of districts already adrift, rising slowly, wistfully, into the bright blue. It looked peaceful from a distance, the way regret sometimes looks like nostalgia. But Tamsin had been inside a drifting quarter before. She could still taste plaster dust in her mouth, still feel floor tiles tilting underfoot while refrigerators slid past like indifferent icebergs. She wiped soil from her hands and examined the crimson indicator lights studding the city's skyline. Each light marked a well whose field had begun to flutter, little seizures in the great muscular grip that kept buildings pressed politely to the planet. She counted 5 on the east side, 2 in the mercantile core, and 1 only 3 blocks from where she stood. That one rattled her most, not because of proximity, but because the Montclair well held down the neighborhood where her brother Aldo and his daughter lived. She had promised Mia a crate of persimmons once the fruit ripened. Now an entire childhood bedroom might be on its way to the stratosphere. She considered reporting to the Municipal Air Corps. Years ago, she'd carried a soldering kit and a licensed pressure suit for them, repairing ventilation leaks on their armored skiffs. But these days the Corps was as likely to issue demolition orders as rescue plans, safer to pulverize a district midair than risk it falling in an uncontrolled plummet later. Aldo's block was full of rent-controlled apartments, beloved corner diners, and one rickety library whose staff still stamped due dates by hand. Demolition orders, Tamsin muttered, and spit into a basil pot. Not on her watch. She moved quickly. Hose out the greenhouse lamps. It saved fuel. Fold the solar tarps. Sling the compost sandbags inside the balloon's netting. She stepped into the brass-ringed gondola, which had once been an antique observation cage on a seaside Ferris wheel, and cinched her harness. The balloon's skin, sewn from greenhouse polyethylene and old sailcloth, throbbed as methane from her rooftop digester filled its cells. Methane was lighter than air and damned flammable, but Tamsin trusted her welds and the little swarm of beetle-shaped fire suppressors she'd trained to patrol the scene. She released the mooring clamps. The garden shrank beneath her, persimmons dwindling to orange pinpricks. Above, the city rose in tiers, terraces, skywalks, hanging plazas, altogether less like architecture than coral built by feverish reef creatures. Shockwaves rippled the haze. A gravity well never failed quietly. As her balloon gained altitude, she spotted Montclair's Keystone Tower yawing upward, its foundations separating from the bedrock like bread dough from a pan. Trinkets of brick and glass spiraled into the air around it, sucked along by the well's unraveling field. "Easy, girl," she whispered, stroking the brass rail as if it were a skittish animal. She adjusted vents, letting some hot gas escape to slow ascent, and plotted a curve that would carry her downwind of the disturbance. She didn't want to get caught in the initial pop when the last containment band snapped. Most gravity wells lay buried under public parks. The city fathers had wanted to mask the humming, monolithic machines with gentle lawns. Montclair's park, an oval of catalpa trees and a forgetful-looking fountain, now dangled upside down, roots and pipework exposed as the whole disk of earth flipped like a massive coin. People clung to benches, planters, one another. A woman in a saffron business coat scrambled after her briefcase. As it drifted off like a paper lantern, Tamsin swung her balloon lower, bringing the gondola within shouting distance. "Rooftop rescue!" she bellowed through her megaphone. "Ropes incoming! Secure yourselves!" Eyes turned skyward, wide with a mixture of wonder and terror. She heard a child's exclamation, either delight or panic. From up here they often sounded the same. Using a crank winch, she lowered a bundle of climbing lines, each tipped with a magnetic cuff. The first takers were teenagers who treated the moment like an amusement ride, laughing as they clipped the cuffs to iron patio railings. Adults followed, their motions brisk and professional. Montclair was no stranger to micro-failures. The cuffs engaged with a clack, and the balloon's frame groaned as extra weight transferred into her rigging. Good mass, she needed mass to pull against if she was going to stabilize the neighborhood. Venner took their wire hooks out, introduced the neighborhood beneath her. The park block rolled lazily, aligning itself parallel to the sky like a raft. On its underbelly, the well's central axle jutted, an obsidian pillar as thick as a redwood stump, ringed by copper petals that should have been pressed firmly against the earth. Instead, they fluttered like a broken flower. Green lightning jumped between petals. Each discharge shaved another percentage point off local gravity. When the field reached zero, the district would accelerate upward forever, or at least until the thermals thinned near the edge of the troposphere, where demolition charges or suffocation would finish what engineering negligence began. Tamsin needed to reach that axle. Inside sat the stabilizer core, a rotating cartridge of condensed baryonic salts. Resync the salt spin, re-engage the pedals, and gravity would resume like nothing happened. Simple on paper. In practice, she'd be working upside down above 2,000 meters of nothing, with a balloon as her only friend. She scanned for Mia's apartment. There, a string of child drawings taped to a window, the paper squares wagging like prayer flags. Aldo stood on the sill, waving both arms, trying to keep his daughter calm. Tamsin flashed her lantern in response. Aldo, 7 years older but always the daredevil, bolted out and grabbed the nearest rope. His free hand clutched a small figure, Mia's stuffed beluga whale. The real Mia followed, and Tamsin's chest unclenched at the sight of them both. The gondola swayed wildly as they hauled themselves aboard. Aldo's grin was shaky. Figures you'd still be flying junkyard balloons. Figures you'd still be living in low-income housing, she shot back, hugging him one-armed. Mia barreled into Tamsin's legs, rattling her like a pocket full of marble. "Can we go home now?" the girl asked. "Working on it, Sprout. First we fix the big magnet." A squadron of municipal skiffs buzzed across the horizon. Their prows glinted demolition charges warm and ready. A public address drone chirped. "All civilian craft, exit perimeter. 72% chance of uncontrolled ascent, clearance to neutralize." "Not if we turn the well back on before they get here." Tamsin handed him the megaphone. "You coordinate evacuees. Clip every cable we've got to something sturdy. Mia?" She fished inside a crate and produced a coil of pea vines still rooted in soil. "Water these if the leaves droop. I need them alive." "Why?" Mia asked, cradling the pot. "Because vines know how to find down." Tamsin clipped her harness to a primary tether and rappelled toward the upside-down park. Heat rippled off the exposed machinery. Friction in the unbalanced rotor made the metal glow sunset red. She paid out rope until her boots touched the fountain's marbled rim, now overhead like a bizarre ceiling. Gravity tugged sideways. She was effectively scaling a wall in a spinning elevator. She'd done weirder things for perennials. At the axle's base, she pulled back a scorched maintenance panel. The stabilizer core was jammed, its salts crusted with what looked like rust but smelled of burnt vanilla, the signature odor of baryonic decay. Someone had skipped maintenance cycles. Budget cuts and political theater, nothing cheaper than invisible infrastructure. She yanked the emergency crank, but the rotor refused to budge. She needed a counterweight strong enough to yank the pedals back into place and give frictionless clearance for the course. The balloon alone didn't weigh enough, but the district did, if she could stitch balloon mass and block mass together in the right geometry. She scrambled back up, reboarded, and found Mia dutifully watering vines while Aldo whistled evacuation orders into the megaphone. Nearly 50 residents now clung to the web of ropes trailing from her balloon, their collective weight pulling the gondola snug against the park's edge. "Perfect." "Mia, give me 4 meters of vine," Tamsin said. She wrapped the green coils around a gyroscopic winch and fed the other ends through ringlets in the balloon's net. P-vines sense constant downward vectors even in confused gravity. They'll tighten along whichever direction the planet lies. We seed them through the rigging. Let them hunt. Aldo raised an eyebrow. "Plant instincts over physics? They're the same thing if you don't overthink it." She released slack. The vines unspooled like curious serpents, groping through swirling dust until their tendrils brushed the well's axle. Instantly they twined around the hot metal, their cellular engines driving roots toward the faint whiff of moisture buried deeper within the machine. As they cinched, the balloon and block locked into a single structural loop. Now, if the block drifted, it would tug on the balloon, and vice versa, each moderating the other's motion. Tamsin clipped a second winch to the rope cluster. Aldo, Mia, everyone, start rocking forward and back when I call it. We're going to impart torque. She timed their sway to the rotor's half-stutter, singing counts. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The human pendulum added oscillation. The vines tightened, complaining with squeaks. On the third surge, the pedals jolted. Sparks sprayed. Then the rotor rolled half a centimeter. Good. She adjusted angle, braced her legs. Again. On the fifth cycle, the rotor freed. A rising harmonic thrum indicated the salts had resumed spin. Iron filings dancing along the axle in patterns that told her gravity was remembering its assignment. Air pressure changed, she felt heavier. The block's upward climb slowed, then halted. The balloon strained but held. Cheers erupted from rooftops and balconies, but Tamsin heard something else. The distant whine of demolition skiffs closing fast. Stabilizing wasn't enough. She needed to put Montclair back where it belonged before the city's risk algorithms declared it unsalvageable. She radioed the incoming squadron with a pirate frequency left over from her Air Corps days. Well 32 restored to 22% and climbing, requesting stay of demolition static. Then a clipped response. Telemetry shows residual drift. Clearance stands. Send an inspector, you cowards, or better, lend thrusters. Negative, protocol. The channel snapped shut. Aldo slammed a fist into the gondola rail. They'll blow regardless. Not if Montclair's touching bedrock when they arrive. Tamsin eyed her sandbag ballasts. If she filled the balloon with more methane and dumped ballast, she could provide downward traction asymmetrically, tipping the block so its edge met the anchored section of city grids still on the ground. But she'd need control authority like never before. She called to the residents. Anyone here know how to sew? Half the hands rose. She passed out sailcloth patches, scissors, flash tape, and bags of dried kelp mulch. We're making supplementary gas cells. Fast. Use mulch as filler layers. It slows diffusion. While they worked, she vented coolant through the balloon's heat pipes, raising internal temperature. The envelope ballooned further. Petrol-smelling air clenched her lungs, but she trusted the beetle suppressors. Next came anchors. She eyed a statue of the city founder protruding from Montclair's roundabout, a stone patriot pointing nobly west. She rappelled again, wrapped high-tension cables around the statue's waist, then ratcheted them through her gondola's capstan. The other end she knotted onto the balloon's keel. Her plan was insane. She would make the balloon function like a tugboat, dragging Montclair in a controlled skid across the air until its edge overlapped the still-grounded pavement. She addressed her accidental crew. When I shout heave, pump those treadle cranks. That powers capstan. People on ropes, shift as instructed. Everyone else keeps sewing or praying, dealer's choice. Aldo planted Mia at the compass stand and gave her the dignified duty of quartermaster. The girl saluted with her stuffed whale. Tamsin drew a breath that tasted of sweat and ozone. Heave! The crowd pumped. The capstan groaned. Cables tightened. The statue lurched, slowly, majestically. The whole block rotated, guided by the vine's living tension and the balloon's stubborn lift. Debris rained like confetti into the sky streets below. Tamsin bled hot gas from starboard vents to fine-tune angle, while releasing methane on port to increase pull. She felt like the conductor of a bizarre orchestra. Wind, roots, human muscles, and antique machinery. Meters became centimeters. The leading edge of Montclair's underside kissed the adjacent fixed roadway with a grinding shriek of crumbling stone. The city trembled. Seismic sensors would be screaming across control rooms, she knew, but real contact mattered more than pristine data. She keyed the pirate channel again. Montclair's got its feet back on. You fire those charges now and you'll shatter the East Arterial. Silence this time lasted longer. Finally, hold position and await structural audit. She sagged against the rail, legs jelly. Around her, people wept, laughed, and danced on what moments ago had been ceiling. The smell of kelp mulch mingled with barbecue smoke from a ruptured restaurant gas line, already commandeered by a pair of dads cooking improvised victory skewers. A medical drone descended, meaty lights flickering. "Please direct injured," it began, and someone slapped a sticker reading "Reserved for Trees" on its hull. The whole district seemed intoxicated on survival. Aldo emerged carrying a dented watering can. "You did it, kid. Team effort." She ruffled Mia's hair. "And a good day for plants." As sun dipped, Tamsin oversaw the removal of her temporary tethers. Vines were replanted in community beds, sandbags returned to the orchard. Engineers in starched uniforms arrived, frowning at her jerry-rigged handiwork. But data was data. Field stabilized at 82%, well within code. Their reports would laud spontaneous civic cohesion, carefully omitting how bureaucracy nearly murdered a neighborhood. Night settled. Lanterns glowed across Montclair, still precariously beautiful. Tamsin anchored her balloon back at Citrio Tower. She found the persimmons heavy and sweet, survivors like their gardener. She picked the ripest, packed them in straw, and carried the crate to Aldo's newly horizontal doorstep. Mia met her with the stuffed whale, now wearing a tiny vine wreath. "Mom always said Auntie Tamsin's head was in the clouds," the girl giggled. "Now I know why." "Tell your mom these clouds grow good fruit." She handed over the crate. From the balcony they watched distant districts where crimson lights still blinked. Gravity wells all over the city, aging, neglected, biding their crises. "So many blocks, so few balloons," Aldo said quietly. "You can't catch them all." "Maybe not," she replied, "but until someone makes better anchors, I'll keep sewing bigger sails." She gazed at her patched balloon, its bulges and scars bold against starlight. Up there was danger and cold air and the roar of skiffs, but also the chance to keep homes tethered to hope, and that, in her gardener's heart, felt like planting seeds in the sky. She lifted her goggles, already plotting supply lists for tomorrow. Gravity, after all, was only half obligation, half invitation, and Tamsin Vale had never turned down a garden in need, whether rooted in soil or floating in blue forever.